Barbara Hendry is Director of UN Environment North America, and Butch Bacani is Program Leader for UN Environment's Principles for Sustainable Insurance Initiative. They join us to discuss that initiative and to discuss a meeting that they both just attended. I want to welcome both of you and thank you for joining us. Now, we had an opportunity in a previous interview to speak to two other participants who were very positive about the meeting you just sponsored. I'd like to get your reactions to it. What are your impressions of the day?
So I think it was a great discussion. It brought a set of constituencies and communities of practice together that hadn't talked to each other before to think about how to tackle the issue of disaster risk and resilience along the Mississippi River. And so I think a big part of that, the success of the discussion, was just getting to understand each other as different constituents. So you had the mayors and the policymakers on one side and representatives from the insurance industry, brokers and risk modeling companies on the other. And that was a really interesting conversation that surfaced a lot of things that reflected some of the perhaps misunderstandings that had been extant between those two communities.
I can't resist asking you you've baited the hook. Give us an example. What was something that was surprising?
So one of the things that was really interesting to me was mayors expressing the fact that they have a real challenge in terms of talking to their constituents about really spreading the amount of the percentage of the population that are insured. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult for them to spend political capital to spread that message when people are facing real risk and destitution, and they feel that they don't necessarily have the political capital to bring that message. They need other partners to help them to do that. That's something that I hadn't thought about, is how can they manage the political market that they're in? And
explain to us what UN Environment North America's role is in these proceedings and why you've taken a particular interest in this project.
So this is very interesting. We've never done this before as UN Environment. We've never partnered with mayors in the American heartland. Our vision for how UN Environment North America can be useful is to really use our platform to bring diverse stakeholders together, to actually generate impact and solutions, not just globally, we're a global organization, but actually that are very relevant to this region. So this is a first step for us. We hope the first of many.
Butch, tell us about your impressions of today. Was it a useful meeting for you as well?
For sure. I think one of the important highlights is that a common language of risk between the mayors and the insurance industry. Everyone had a common understanding and agenda to be able to better manage risk in communities, and that is also what is the insurance industry for. The core business of the insurance industry is to understand and manage risk, and these are the risks that the mayors are facing, whether it's storms, hurricanes, floods. These are very real live examples of what's happening nowadays. So I think there was a common understanding there of where to start from. And that's what the day was all about. So that was already a very important insight that came out of the day.
And your project, the Principles for Sustainable Insurance Initiative. Tell us about that project, what you're hoping to achieve, and how that relates to this meeting today.
Right. So the Principles for Sustainable Insurance are a set of global principles that were forged by the global insurance industry together with the United Nations through UN Environment that were launched in 2012. And the whole idea of these principles is how to strengthen the contribution of the global insurance industry to building more resilient, more inclusive, and more sustainable communities and economies out there. It has already led to the largest collaborative initiative between the UN and the UN and the global insurance industry. And the whole agenda is simple. We want to be able to harness, the UN wants to be able to harness and work together with the insurance industry its triple role in contributing to economic, social, and environmental sustainability. That's one role is to better understand, prevent, and reduce risk through better land use planning, better building codes, better building standards, better risk assessment. Insurance solutions is the second role. How can you can't eliminate all risks, so there will always be a residual risk that has to be absorbed, and public finance is not enough for that. So how can you also have insurance solutions from a private market that will complement that? And then finally is an aspect of the global insurance industry which is largely untapped. Globally, the insurance industry manages over 30 trillion in assets under management. How that capital is deployed would have a telling impact on how resilient and sustainable cities and towns will be.
Is there either country or region or particular municipality who is farther ahead on this that could be used as a global model?
There are excellent examples around the world. In other countries, for example, in Africa, African states have come together to better understand their drought risk, and that's the creation of the African Risk Capacity Insurance Facility. In the Caribbean states have come together to understand their hurricane risk and flood risk, and they've formed together a facility that can help them better manage these risks. In Europe, you also have Nordic countries in Norway and Denmark, where cities and actually the insurance industry are coming together to actually reduce risk on the ground through by sharing loss data, for example, so that development planning by cities is more risk informed. So there are many examples out there, and there's no reason why those things cannot happen here. And what's important here that we've seen is that there is a common vision by the Mississippi River's mayors to come together and say, we have a whole set of risks along the whole corridor, and we're coming together to understand and better manage that together with the insurance industry.
So when you think about the challenges involved with addressing the types of problems that you're addressing, people think of things like climate change as an obvious one, and the kind of storms and disruptions that come with that. And if you want to talk about that, I'd like to hear more of your thoughts on that. But also, are there other challenges that maybe aren't so obvious to people?
Well, maybe just to kick off, one of the constituencies that we didn't have quite so many of in the room today was at state level, and particularly the state regulators who play such a critical role in sending out market signals and enforcing codes and really underpinning some of the viability of the insurance coverage. And that's partly it was just we wanted to keep the group small so we could actually have a dialogue. But clearly that is a dimension that we need to make sure we bring in. And there will be challenges there. It's 10 states up and down the Mississippi River who all have diverse interests. So I think that's one challenge. Another challenge is something the mayors kept raising is what about the communities that can't afford insurance? What about people who are absolutely destitute and are looking at flood events that have come thick and fast, and they've never been able to rebuild and can't afford to get support to do that. So we've got challenges at many levels.
Any thoughts on that, Butch? What other challenges?
I think another challenge beyond the issue itself of extreme events, for example,
Yes.
is really time horizon. So you need to look far into the future and not simply address what's in store for the next year. So if you're talking about, for example, city infrastructure, you need to really have a long-term agenda. And sometimes, whether it's on the private sector side, on business, or on the political side, and the public sector side, these horizons are shorter. And
next quarter profits or next election, not
exactly
20 years out.
Exactly, and you're really thinking about long-term resilience and sustainability here. So that's one. The other challenge, I think, is fragmentation. So I think the recipe for success is here because the mayors have come together to say we have a common shared risk, and we need to address that collectively. And the insurers, who are fierce competitors in the market, have come here in a pre-competitive space. And that's important to be able to look into collaborative solutions going forward. So it's very important to look into these areas, for example, of really to forge solutions.
Your notion of the time horizon spurs a thought in my head about, do we have enough time to address some of these issues? I know that's an imponderable on one level, but what is your sense of the amount of activity, the type that you're involved in, and the sense of urgency versus how much time we have to make these decisions before we reach some point of no return?
Ooh, that's a tough question.
I know it's sort of the dystopia question, or the.
It's really difficult to answer that. I think the thing that I would say is that I had the sense that people in the room understand that we have to find a solution.
There is a sense of urgency.
There is a sense of urgency. The Mississippi River has been facing 500-year, 100-year, 1,000-year flood events all within the last 10 years. The penny has absolutely dropped that something has to be done. and that they need new partners and diverse partners to be able to do that. So there's a kind of general will there. The trick is, how do you challenge it? How do you channel it?
Is this Mississippi River Cities and Towns initiative unique, looking at the nation or the globe, or are there similar sort of cooperatives around important resources or areas with particular risks associated with them?
Oh, there are definitely other examples around the world. For example, in Australia, the insurance industry, together with other parts of business, have worked with the Australian government to form the Australian Business Roundtable for disaster resilient communities. And there are others in Asia, in Africa. So this is what we're seeing at UN Environment, because we have a global mandate, is that we're seeing creative partnerships, innovation, whereas before it was simply public sector or private sector. But now we're really looking at public-private and also civil society coming on board to the agenda. And this is where the UN, as the convening power of the UN to bring together multiple stakeholders, becomes a real asset.
It's very encouraging to hear the silos are falling, and you're helping make that happen. Final thought is on next steps. I asked our previous guests when we had Mr. Kaplan from the insurance industry and Mayor Johnson in here, I suggested this isn't just the beginning, right? I mean, this isn't just a one-off. This is the beginning of a collaboration. Do you have the same vision for this? Do you see this as...
I'd like to know what they said.
They said they're in it for the long haul, that they would like to see this be just a first meeting, but not the end of the discussion. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. It's the start of a conversation. So I think there was a huge appetite to carry on the conversation, maybe in a slightly smaller group. The mayors are very focused on trying to get a vulnerability assessment the whole length of the Mississippi River. It's never been done before. I think there's some partners on the insurance industry side who are eager to come along with that. We have to work out the mechanisms of what that would look like.
What are your hopes moving forward?
So I think that action speaks louder than words. It's great to have the conversation going, but we need to get into the action mode and solution mode. And what is very exciting in the meeting was that ideas were thrown on the table on what could be done, whether it's on risk analysis, on risk reduction, insurance solutions, or potential investments. These are all part of the solution set. And the more concrete we are with our ideas, and the more we can show success stories, then actually this could be the idea is to amplify that and get others on board to see how can we really bring this to scale.
Butch and Barbara, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us today, and congratulations on a successful day, and good luck in continuing this important work.
Thank you
so much.